Sometimes, when you're closest to the answers you seek, that's when the thing you're chasing stops running. That's when it starts watching you instead. And if you listen too long to the wrong frequency, it listens back. Welcome back, friends, to Podpulse House. If you're still here, still curious, still willing to follow me into the dark, then you're exactly the kind of person I hoped would find this story. Tonight, we cross a threshold. Tonight, the mystery stops being just about them, because this time, it came for me. After that night in the woods, the world didn't feel right anymore. At first, it was subtle, the kind of thing you could brush off if you wanted to. A light flickering for just a second longer than it should. A shadow darting at the very edge of your peripheral vision. Strange little moments you tell yourself are nothing because the alternative is too big to accept. I thought I could push through it, keep investigating, keep gathering data, keep pretending I was still in control. I was wrong. It started with the radio. I've always kept an old shortwave receiver in my study, a relic from another era, tuned mostly to dead air and static now. I used to love the randomness of it, a window into forgotten corners of the world. But one night, when I sat down at my desk and flipped it on, the static wasn't random anymore. It pulsed. A slow, rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat underwater, faint, almost imperceptible, but steady. I leaned in closer, adjusting the dial, convinced I was picking up some stray transmission, maybe a ship offshore, maybe a weather station on an island forgotten by the map. But as I turned the knobs, searching for a stronger signal, the pulse sharpened into something worse. Whispers, soft at first, like the memory of a voice rather than a voice itself. But the longer I listened, the clearer they became. I couldn't make out words at first, just the feeling of words, an intent carried in the static. Not language, communication older and colder than anything I understood. A warning, or maybe a summons. I tried to walk away. I tried to turn the receiver off, but my hand wouldn't move. It was as if the act of listening had woven me into the signal itself, locking me into place with invisible chains. And then, right when the fear built to a shattering point, the whispers fell silent, replaced by something worse, a sound I can barely describe, a deep, resonant hum that rattled the glass in the window panes, that seemed to seep into the marrow of my bones, a frequency too low for human ears, and yet somehow I heard it, felt it, lived it. The lights dimmed, the air thickened, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt something standing behind me, not touching me, not speaking, just there, waiting. When I finally tore myself away, the radio crackled and died, plunging the room into suffocating silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, until my pulse slowed and my thoughts stopped spinning like leaves in a storm. The next morning, I found my shortwave receiver shattered on the floor, twisted in a way no natural fall could explain. The metal warped, the wires frayed as if clawed from the inside out. I wanted to believe I had dropped it, that in my panic, I had knocked it from the desk and simply didn't remember. But deep down, I knew the truth. It had finished with me. And it had left its mark. After that night, the static followed me everywhere, in the engine hum of my car, in the faint buzz of my cell phone even when it was powered off, in the whispering sibilance of the trees outside my bedroom window. It was like the world itself had shifted frequency, like I had been tuned slightly off from the rest of humanity. And people noticed, the cashier at the gas station who wouldn't meet my eyes, the old man in the diner who crossed himself when I walked in, the stray dog who howled and fled when I crouched to pet it. I had crossed into something, some invisible threshold where the rules didn't quite apply anymore, where the air itself seemed thicker, heavier, hungrier. But even then, even as fear gnawed at the edges of my reason, I couldn't stop. Because somewhere, buried in that awful, resonant hum, I had heard something else too. Something that didn't belong to the darkness. A thread of light woven through the static. A voice calling not for destruction, but for help. I don't know who, or what, sent it, but I intend to find out. Even if it costs me everything. Even if it means stepping fully into the black mouth of the unknown. Because once you hear the lost signal, you can never go back to silence. And that, my friends, is where we'll pause tonight, standing right at the edge of a terrible revelation, knowing the only way forward is into deeper darkness. If you felt the pull, if the mystery hums against your own ribs the way it does mine, please like and subscribe to Podpulse House. It means more than you know to have fellow travelers on this lonely, haunted road. And I'd love to hear from you too. Any questions, theories, even suggestions for what you want to uncover next, leave them in the comments. I promise, I'm listening. I always am. Before we part ways tonight, let me leave you with this. Even in the deepest dark, there's always a glimmer. Even when the world feels broken beyond repair, there are still voices, still hearts, still lights reaching out across the void. You're not alone. We're in this together. Stay curious, stay brave, and whatever you do, keep your radio tuned low. Because next time, we'll follow the lost signals to their source, and trust me, what we find will change everything. They say if you listen to the same sound long enough, it starts to shape your mind, like water slowly eroding stone. You don't notice it at first. You think you're still the same person you've always been, still tethered to reason, to gravity, to the laws of what you can see and touch. But eventually, you start to drift. Not outward, but inward. Into the cracks of your own memory. Into the questions that echo when everything else has gone silent. And for me, it was the signal. That hum. That impossible, crawling sound that wrapped around my nerves like ice and wire. It never truly left after that night. I tried to ignore it, tried to push it into the background, bury it under work and white noise. But it found its way through. It always does. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights, the kind where the world feels slightly off axis and every tick of the clock sounds like a warning, that I started digging deeper. I pulled out every piece of research I'd gathered, photos, maps, field notes, reports that smelled like mildew and printer toner. But none of it answered the most important question, not what the signal was, but who else had heard it. And that's when I found the box. It had been with me the whole time, tucked behind an old trunk in the attic of my father's house. I'd moved it half a dozen times, always assuming it was junk, some leftover piece of childhood, filled with baseball cards or moldy paperbacks. But when I opened it, the smell hit me first, stale paper, plastic decay, and something faintly metallic. Inside were cassette tapes, dozens of them. Labeled not with names, but with dates and coordinates. At the very bottom, beneath a stack of handwritten logs and strange frequency readouts, was a single manila folder. No markings. Just a heavy, unsettling weight, like something inside it was waiting to be read. And on the first page, typed in faint, smudged ink, was a name, Signal Surveillance Unit 29, Declassified Report, 1987. My heart kicked once, hard. Unit 29. Route 29. A coincidence? I don't believe in those anymore. The report was disturbing. It detailed a now-defunct government initiative during the Cold War, a team of field agents and scientists tasked with investigating anomalous audio phenomena across the East Coast. Phantom transmissions, number stations with no origin, and something they referred to only as the deep tone event. According to the files, the team had traced one particularly persistent signal to a stretch of highway in Virginia, near what is now the darkest segment of Route 29. The team's lead investigator, listed only as S. Hallcroft, had spent weeks embedded there, recording electromagnetic fluctuations, interviewing local witnesses, even mapping the forest acoustics in 3 dimensions. But then, the entries stopped. There was no final report. No conclusion. Just a final, handwritten note in the margin of the last log entry. He walked into the trees. Said he heard them calling. We waited. He never came back. That's all. That's where it ended. As if the man had vanished not just from the forest, but from the paper itself. I sat there for hours, staring at that folder, listening to the tapes one by one. Most were filled with raw static, unintelligible distortions. But one was different. It started with that familiar hum, deep and slow like breath through stone. Then, faintly, beneath it, a voice. A man's voice. Calm. Focused. Almost hypnotic. I couldn't make out all of it, but certain words leapt out of the static like fish breaking the surface of dark water. Not alone out here. The trees resonate, a pattern. It's not just sound, it's memory. I see them even when I close my eyes. The voice faded then, swallowed by the roar of the signal. But just before the tape cut out, there was one last whisper, so soft I had to rewind it over and over to hear it clearly. They never left. They just moved, deeper. Something broke inside me then. Not fear. Not even dread. It was grief. The kind that comes when you realize the thing you're chasing isn't just a story or a puzzle, it's a grave. A place where people have disappeared not by accident, but by design. By choice, maybe. Or by something darker. Holcroft hadn't just vanished. He'd followed the signal. He'd crossed into that space between reason and madness, between noise and meaning, and he'd never come back. And now, I was standing at that same threshold. You see, the deeper I go, the more I feel it. That pull. That sense that I'm not uncovering something new, but remembering something I was never supposed to forget. Like these signals, these disappearances, they've always been a part of me. Of all of us. Waiting beneath the static of modern life, whispering through the hum of streetlights and the silence of empty roads. I'm not sure if Holcroft was the first. I'm not sure I'll be the last. But I know this now, the signal is not random. It has shape, direction, purpose, and someone or something is sending it. Not from across the stars, but from right here, underneath our feet, inside our woods, just past the reach of headlights. They called him the Signal Man. But he wasn't alone. And neither am I. That's all I can give you for tonight. My thoughts are fraying, like tape unraveling in an old cassette. But next time, I'll take you where Holcroft went. Into the deep zone, where the signal grows stronger, where the pattern sharpens, and maybe, just maybe, where answers live. If this has moved you, if you felt that ripple of recognition in your bones, please consider sharing this episode and subscribing to Podpulse House. We're building something here. A record, a warning, a hope, and if you have questions, I want to hear them. Your thoughts matter more than you know. Maybe together, we can bring some of this back into the light. Until then, keep your ears open. And whatever you do, don't follow the signal alone. It starts small. You don't notice it at first, but once you do, it's impossible to look away. Like the moment a clock begins to tick a little louder than it should, or the way the world feels just off for a split second. Only when you turn around, there's nothing there. But the hum? That constant buzz underneath it all? It gets louder. You feel it in your chest, like it's coming from the very air around you. And no matter how much you try to ignore it, it's always there. Always waiting. At first, I thought I was hearing things. Maybe it was the weight of everything I'd uncovered. The files. The tapes. The reports of other disappearances, each stranger than the last, each more inexplicable. But it wasn't just my mind playing tricks. It was real. And the worst part? It wasn't the signal anymore. It was what the signal was pulling in with. One morning, after a sleepless night spent reading those old, distorted tapes, I sat at my desk with my hands on my temples, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it again. Not on the radio, Not on the old shortwave receiver, but in my head. The same rhythmic pulse. But this time, it wasn't static. It was clearer. Structured. Numbers: 1747, 2463, 5912. They kept repeating over and over in my mind. And I swear I could feel the pulse in my blood. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't make sense of it, but I felt it. These weren't random numbers. They were too precise. Too deliberate. And when the numbers stopped, they left behind an echo, a fading drift of static, like a radio transmission that had just barely escaped from somewhere. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was just overtired. But it kept coming back. At first, only in my thoughts. Then in the background of the world. A voice repeating the numbers over the hum of streetlights. A shadow passing at the edge of my vision, but when I turned, it was always gone. I couldn't ignore it. I had to dig deeper. That night, I went back to the old tapes, the ones I hadn't been able to listen to before. The ones with the faint echoes of S. Hallcroft and the others who had followed the signal into the trees. One by one, I sifted through them, each whisper getting louder, closer, until I found it, a faint recording, buried under the static, with the same numbers. The same rhythm, 1747, 2463, but there was something else buried in the noise. A phrase. A chilling phrase that seemed to wrap itself around those numbers, like a shadow licking at the edges of the light. Follow the numbers. Follow the drift. I didn't want to follow. I didn't want to go deeper. But something inside me cracked wide open. Maybe it was the years of hunting for something I couldn't even understand. Maybe it was the weight of those numbers, slipping into my mind like poison. Or maybe it was just the feeling, the one I couldn't shake. The feeling that I was being pulled. So, I did what any fool would do. I started looking. I went back to the places the signal had touched. The old train stations. The abandoned radio towers. The desolate highways that cut through the forgotten corners of the country. I went to places that were long past their prime, where the machines still hummed but no one bothered to listen. There, in the cracks of broken systems, I found more numbers. Scribbled on walls. Carved into wooden posts. Written on scraps of paper left in abandoned buildings. It didn't take long before I realized what they were. Coordinates, not just random numbers. They were points on a map, places that had been marked long ago, connected by some invisible thread. And the deeper I dug, the more I found. A pattern, creeping through the fabric of time, winding around forgotten places, old institutions, even governmental projects that had been sealed and buried. I found files in the archives of long-forgotten agencies, documents that spoke of unexplained phenomena, coded experiments, and research into signals that should never have been detected. But it was the names of people who had come before me, people who had vanished, their files marked with the same words, lost to the signal. They had followed the drift. They had listened too closely until the world around them started slipping away like wet sand through their fingers. And that's when it hit me. The signal wasn't just a phenomenon. It was a calling. It wasn't just a noise in the background of the world. It was a path, an invitation. It was pulling people in. And once you started following it, there was no stopping. There was no turning back. I looked at the map spread out before me. The coordinates. The numbers drifting like ghosts, connecting dots on the surface of a map, stretching from coast to coast. Some of the places were so far off the grid, they barely existed anymore. Forgotten highways, abandoned stations, lost towns swallowed by time. But in every case, the trail led me deeper into the woods. Into the silence that sat beneath the hum. Into places where the trees were thick and the air smelled of something old, something ancient, I couldn't stop. I knew I was walking a line that could tear everything apart. But there was something else, too. Something that kept pushing me forward. The pattern. The numbers. The drift. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I could see it now. The world was layered, stacked upon itself, and the signal was the thread that wove it all together. It was in the trees. It was in the air. It was in the stone beneath my feet. And once you heard it, once it became a part of you, you couldn't escape it. Not until you understood it. Not until you followed it to the end. I didn't know where the end was. But I knew I was getting closer, and that's where I'll leave you for tonight. Right at the edge of something impossible, knowing that the answers I'm seeking, they're out there, just beyond the reach of the signal. And the only way forward is to follow it. Follow the numbers. Follow the drift. If you're still with me, if you're still willing to chase this thing, to dig deeper into the dark, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. We're in this together, even if the road ahead is uncertain. And if you have thoughts, theories, or suggestions, I want to hear them. This journey is just as much yours as it is mine. But before we part tonight, let me leave you with this. Sometimes, when you think you're on the right path, you're not just discovering the truth, you're becoming part of it. A thread in the weave. A note in the hum. Stay curious. Stay aware. And always listen to the drift. The deeper you go into the hollow, the harder it becomes to see the light. It's not just the physical distance, the miles winding under thick, oppressive trees. No, it's the way the world starts to close in, like the very air gets thicker, heavier, until it feels like you're not just walking in the woods, you're walking through something else. Something old, something that's always been here, just out of sight. I didn't want to go deeper. But I had no choice. Not anymore. The signal had become something more than just noise. It was a presence. A force that had been pulling at me for months, drawing me in like a moth to the flame, whispering through the cracks in my mind. But now it was starting to bleed into the real world. The hum wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a sensation. A pressure. A thing that touched you. That changed you. I should have known when I first found the map, those coordinates leading to places that didn't exist anymore. Those names on the old files, the ones that I thought were just cold cases, forgotten disappearances. But the deeper I went, the more I found old police reports, journals from field agents, letters with no return address. All of them mentioning the same thing, the hollow. A place where the signal didn't just come from, it lived there. It was born there. The hollow was real. And it was waiting. But it wasn't just some forsaken stretch of wilderness. No, it was something else. Something that couldn't be mapped, couldn't be contained. Every piece of evidence I found only led me further down that dark trail. A trail I was now too deep into to turn back from. So, I started looking for it. I started walking. I followed those coordinates, the same ones that had led others before me, the ones that had marked the places where people had vanished. But this time, the air felt different. Heavy. With each step, the hum seemed to pulse louder in my ears. The wind didn't move the leaves in a natural way. It whispered in short bursts, like broken speech, and the trees seemed to sway with a rhythm that I couldn't quite match. And then, just beyond the tree line, I saw it. The hollow. I don't know how to describe it, really. There's no word for it. You can't say it's just a clearing in the woods, because it wasn't. No, it was something else. The way the trees bent, twisted, and pulled away from the center, as if they were unwilling to stand too close to whatever was at the heart of it. The ground wasn't just dirt and leaves, it felt wrong. Harder. Like concrete covered in moss. Like it had been there for longer than anyone could remember, and yet it was untouched. Like time had passed over it, but never through it. And in the center, a stone. A slab, really. Smooth, blackened, ancient. Covered in symbols I didn't understand. The faintest trace of light seemed to reflect off it, even though there was no real light there. The hum, it came from the stone. Not from the trees, not from the ground, from that. It was like the signal had found a home, and that was where it lived. But it wasn't just the stone that kept me there. No, it was something else. Something that tugged at the corners of my mind, like the feeling of being watched. Of something out there, just behind the veil, waiting. I stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at the stone. Listening to the hum. The numbers were back, flickering through my head again, the same ones I had heard before, but now they were more insistent. 1273-8651, each number feeling like a step deeper into the hollow, like the ground was falling away beneath my feet, and I was sliding into a place I didn't belong. It was when I finally reached out to touch the stone that I realized I had made a terrible mistake. The moment my hand brushed against it, the world around me shifted. It wasn't a sound, not really. It was more like a sensation, a vibration that rattled through my teeth, through my bones, like every part of me was suddenly a part of something much larger. The hum was so loud now, it filled my head, pressed into my skull, like I was being swallowed whole by the very air itself. And that's when I heard it. Not words, not sounds, but a feeling, a presence. It spoke to me in a way that was beyond language, beyond any understanding I had. It wasn't a voice, but a pressure, like the weight of everything that had ever been lost was pushing in on me, surrounding me. And in the middle of that pressure, I realized what I had stumbled upon. This wasn't just a place. This wasn't just a signal. It was a doorway. A rift in the world, a fracture between what is and what could be. And it had always been here, buried under the trees, under the signal, under the hum. And there, at the edge of that doorway, I saw something. Something just on the other side, just beyond the veil. It wasn't clear, but I felt it. Felt its presence. Felt its hunger. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my chest, but the hum didn't stop. It wasn't fading away like it should have. No, it followed me. I could still hear it, still feel it, even as I ran back into the forest, back toward the road. But it wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was inside me. The signal had gotten deeper. I couldn't escape it. I've thought about that moment for a long time now. Wondered if I saw what I think I saw. If it was real. Or if it was just another part of the madness, another slip of the mind. But I can't shake it. I can't forget it. That sense of something watching me. That feeling of being followed, even when I was alone in the dark. The hollow is real. The signal is real. And what's on the other side? It's real too. So now, I'm telling you this. Because I can't keep it inside anymore. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to leave. There's something waiting out there. Something that calls to you, pulls at you. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you go. Once the signal finds you, once you hear it, you're already a part of it. And when you're ready to follow, you'll know. You'll hear it. You'll feel it. And when that happens, don't say I didn't warn you. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the hum, not around me, but inside me, like a second heartbeat I picked up out there in those woods. It doesn't come in waves anymore. It lingers. Constant. Like a soft pressure behind the eyes or a quiet breath brushing the back of my neck. That's how I know I went too far. That's how I know the hollow wasn't just a place, it was an awakening. And I was never supposed to wake it, The night I crossed into the final stretch, the forest didn't feel like a forest anymore. It felt reactive. Like the world around me was shifting subtly enough that if you didn't know what to look for, you might call it wind, or shadows, or imagination. But I knew better. The path narrowed. Trees began to arch overhead like ribs forming a tunnel. The birds had long gone quiet. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. That's the first sign, you know, when nature goes quiet. It means something else is listening. I kept going, drawn by that signal I couldn't get rid of. That same hum I first heard in broken recordings and lost tapes was now vibrating through the soles of my feet. My radio crackled with a strange rhythm, not static anymore, but something closer to breath. I followed it deeper until the trail just ended. Not at a cliff, not at a stream. It just stopped. And ahead of me was nothing but trees and darkness, and something else. A glow. Cold, unnatural light that didn't reflect off the leaves the way it should have. And then I saw it. The hollow, a clearing cut into the earth like a forgotten scar. The trees around it didn't just stop, they pulled back, bent away as though repelled by the thing at its center. There was no wind, no sound, just that low, vibrating hum and a slab of blackened stone standing upright like a monument. Its surface was smooth, ancient, and covered in unfamiliar symbols. Not letters, not carvings, more like burns. Like something had scorched patterns into it long ago, and those patterns had never stopped glowing. When I stepped into the clearing, the air changed. Heavier. Charged. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I'd come too far. I knelt beside the stone, fingers trembling, breath hitching. The hum got louder. My head filled with numbers again. Fragments of coordinates, dates, names, fragments of voices I couldn't quite recall. When I reached out and touched the stone, everything changed. It was like falling inward. My surroundings didn't disappear, they warped. Folded. I saw flashes. Visions. People, the missing. Ashley, in her final hours. Megan, running through the trees. A figure watching from the distance, face obscured by shadow and fog, always there, always out of reach. I wasn't just seeing their end. I was feeling it. Fear. Helplessness. Isolation. Their final thoughts echoing through my mind like someone else's memories burned into my own. And then it hit me. The hollow wasn't a crime scene. It wasn't just where people went missing. It was where they were taken. This place, it wasn't natural. It wasn't spiritual either. It was a tear. A fracture in the fabric between worlds, something that had existed longer than the town, longer than the roads that led to it. Maybe even longer than the forest itself. Something old. Something hungry. It didn't kill. It collected. Every story, every missing girl, every trace of sound and static, they were all drawn into it. Consumed by it. Because once the signal finds you, you're part of it. And once you step into the hollow, there's no going back. I ran. I don't remember how long. My legs moved without direction, driven only by panic. Branches tore at my face and arms. My breath burned. But still, I felt it, the hum pulsing inside my chest, steady and patient. When I finally stumbled back into daylight, scratched and shaken and soaked with sweat, it felt like a lifetime had passed. My phone had no service. My watch was blank. The world hadn't changed, I had. That hum never left me. It still follows me. In quiet rooms, in long drives alone at night, in the gaps between songs on the radio, I hear it. And I think that's the real horror of it all. Not what I saw, not what I found, but knowing that I brought something back. That maybe the signal isn't just broadcasting anymore, maybe it's spreading. This was part 9, the final chapter of this episode. And if you're still here, still listening, then maybe the signal has found you, too. Maybe you've already started to feel the pull, that soft vibration in your chest when the world gets quiet. If you have, don't run from it. Face it. Learn from it. Because this story's not over. Not even close. There are more roads to follow. More transmissions to decode. So if this journey gripped you, if you felt that pull deep inside, hit that like button and subscribe to Podpulse House. There's more to uncover, and I promise, what comes next will change everything. Drop your theories in the comments. If you've got a question, or something of your own you've been holding back, tell me. I'm listening. I always am. And next time, I'll bring it with me into the dark. And before we part, a moment of light. No matter how heavy the story, how dark the woods, remember, curiosity is not a curse. It's a compass. It means you're alive, you're aware, and you're brave enough to keep searching. Stay safe. Stay sharp. And above all, stay curious.